Hello, and welcome to Lesson 7. This week we're going to learn how to identify minor key signatures, and then we're going to talk about how to do solfege in a minor key. Before we can jump into identifying minor keys, we need to review how to identify major keys. So remember, when the key signature uses sharps, the last sharp, which is the one that's furthest to the right, is T. So you go up one half step from that note and you land on do, and that's the name of your major key. When the key signature uses flats, the final flat is fa. And so then you just have to count down to do, and always be sure to double check the key signature to see if the note that you landed on has a flat. It almost always will. And if there are no sharps and no flats in the key signature, it's C major, and we just have to remember that one. Boy, is it a good thing we just reviewed that, because the first step when we go to find the minor key is actually to find the major key. So this example is using sharps. So we find our final sharp, which is this one, and that's D sharp. Then we'll go over to our keyboard, we'll find D sharp and go up a half step, which lands us on E. So E is do, which means that the major key for this key signature would be E major. The next step in identifying the minor key is going to be to find la. So since this is E major, we know that E is do. Then we go one step down to T, and finally one more step down to la. Then our final step is to add the note name so that we can find the note name for la. So we already know that we're in E major, do is E. Then for T, we're on the D line, but remember to go back and check your key signature because there might be accidentals, and in fact there is. It's not D, it's D sharp. And then la is on the C line, but when we go back to check in the key signature, we'll see that it's actually C sharp. And la is actually going to be the name of our minor key signature. So since la is C sharp, that makes this minor key C sharp minor. And remember to always write major and minor when you're naming your key signatures, or at least the abbreviations, which I've used here, MAJ for major and MIN for minor. It's really important, especially now that we have two different possibilities. So now let's do one more example. This time we're using flats in our key signature. So step one is to find the major key, and we remember that the final flat is fa. So here's our final flat, A flat, and we're going to count down. Fa, mi, re, do puts us on E, but then when we go back to the key signature, we're going to check and we're going to see that in this key, all E's are flat. So that makes this actually E flat major. Then once we've found our major key, the next step is to count down to la. So we already know that E flat is do. Then we'll go one step down to T, and one more step down to la. Ta-da! And then finally we have to give these note names. So do is E flat, T is on the D line. We're going to check our key signature. Nope, there's no D flat, so that means that T is D natural. La is on the C space, and when we check our key signature, we see that there's no C flat, it's just C natural in this key. So that means that la is C natural. Remember that la is the name of the minor key. So since la is C natural in this key, that makes this C minor. And again, I'm including the minor as I name the key signature. Now let's get on to the topic I know you're all dying to discuss. How do I do solfege for an exercise in minor mode? Remember how when we were identifying our minor key signatures, we needed to first find the major key and then find La? That's because instead of going from do to do, the minor scale actually goes from La to La. So if we look at this key signature, we'd first find the major key and find that it's E flat major, which means that E flat is do. Notice though that E flat is not our first note in this scale, it's the third one, which means that this scale is probably a minor scale. So we've already labeled our do, then let's go up to the next note and call that re. Then we have mi and fa, so, la, and then let's go back and finish it down here. If this is do here, then that makes the note below it ti, and the note below that la. So we've just solfeged our first minor scale. Now let's go ahead and sing it. Here's la, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la. Because the minor scale goes from La to La, we actually don't have to change anything about our solfege, even if an exercise is written in minor. So for instance, this exercise is written in A minor, but when we go to solfege it, we're going to use the relative major key. And that's referring to the major key that shares this same key signature, which is no sharps, no flats, super easy, C major. So if we're thinking in C major, then C is going to be do, and we can count down to find what our starting pitch is. So here's C, do, ti, la. So we're starting on la. And then it's solfeging the way you're used to. La, do, mi, la. And now here we've come to an accidental. So we're gonna, as we practiced last week, check the key signature to see if it's already in there, and this is just a courtesy, but it's not. There's no sharps or flats in this key signature, so this is an accidental outside of the key signature. That means we need to use the same steps that we took last week. If this sharp sign wasn't there, if it was G natural, this would be a so. But since G sharp is higher than G natural, that means that we need to use the raised version of this solfege syllable, which is C. And then the last note is la again. You are much more likely to see chromatic solfege in minor keys, particularly the raised versions of fa and so, which are fi and si. And we'll get into why that is next week, but just be aware that you are very likely to see those two changes when you're doing exercises in minor.